Hello students, welcome back to the second part of the lecture over chapter 23 that deals with evaluating variances from standard cost. Okay, the next problem that I'm going to be covering is exercise 23-7, which deals with standard product cost and direct materials variance. Okay, so this is an example where we have H.J. Haynes Company uses standards to control its material cost. Assume that a batch of ketchup, which is made up a batch of 7,650 pounds, has the following standards. So, for every batch of ketchup, we need whole tomatoes, vinegar, corn syrup, and salt. So we are needing 5,000 pounds of whole tomatoes at 75 cents a pound, vinegar 350 gallons at 90 cents per gallon, corn syrup 40 gallons at $7.50 a gallon, and salt 125 pounds at $1.80 a pound. These are my standard quantities and price. That is what I'm anticipating using to be able to produce my batch of ketchup, which is made up of 7,650 pounds of ketchup. So this is my standard quantity and my standard price. Now, the actual materials in a batch, I don't know what's wrong with me that I can't read today, I'm sorry. The actual materials in a batch may vary from the standard due to tomato characteristics. Assume that the actual quantity of materials for batch 08-99 were as follows. So these are the actual amount of materials used. We use 4,900 pounds of tomato, 375 gallons of vinegar, 36 gallons of corn syrup, and 140 pounds of salt. And we have two requirements in this problem. The first requirement is we're going to determine the standard unit materials cost per pound for a standard batch. So very important here, they're asking you for the standard unit material cost per pound for a standard batch. So this has nothing to do with actuals. This is all standard information. Okay, so I've set up a little template over here just to simplify things for us. I've listed the ingredients. So we have whole tomatoes, vinegar, corn syrup, and salt. Okay, now the computation to be able to calculate my standard unit materials cost per pound is as follows. I'm going to have my standard quantity times my standard price equals my standard cost per batch. Once I figure out my standard cost for each of the ingredients, I can get my total cost and then divide that by my batch total, which is the 7,600 pounds of ketchup that I'm producing. So let's take it a step at a time. First, we're going to start off with our standard quantity of whole tomatoes. According to the problem, we have 5,000 pounds of tomato. Okay? My standard price for the tomatoes is 75 cents. Okay? So now, to get my standard cost per batch, you multiply them. So I'm going to multiply my 5,000 times my 75 cents. And that gives me 3,750. Okay? Now we're going to do the same thing for vinegar. For vinegar, I need 350 gallons of vinegar. And let me insert a cell here. That way I can label these correctly. Okay? So this is pounds. This is gallons. Okay? That way I know. Okay, so I've got 350 gallons. And every gallon costs me 90 cents. Okay? So I am going to go ahead and I'm going to multiply my 350 gallons times my 90 cents, and that's going to give me $315. Okay. Now I'm going to do corn syrup. For the corn syrup, I've got 40 gallons, and my standard price is $7.50. $7.50. And then that's going to be 40 times 750. That gives me $300. So all I'm doing is multiplying. It's just that I'm doing it in Excel. It's just easier for me to do. Okay. And then last but not least, we have 125 pounds of salt. Okay. And the standard price for the salt is $1.80 per pound. So then that's going to give me 125 times $1.80. That's going to give me $225. Okay. Now I can get a total. Okay. How much am I going to spend in materials to produce this batch of ketchup? Okay. Well, I'm going to spend $4,590. Okay. Now, let me see if I can insert. I'm going to divide that, okay, by the pounds per batch. Okay. So, the pounds per batch are, I'm going to divide this, and this should be centered. Okay. So, I'm going to divide it by, it says here that I am manufacturing a batch of ketchup, and that batch is made of 7,750 pounds of ketchup. So, 7,650 pounds. Okay. So, I'm going to get my total cost, which is $45.90, and I'm going to divide it by my 7,600 pounds of ketchup that I'm manufacturing. So then that's going to give me, okay, $45.90 divided by 76.50. That is going to give me 60 cents per pound. Okay. So for every pound of ketchup that I manufacture, I'm going to spend $60 in materials. That includes your tomatoes, your vinegar, your syrup, and your salt. So now I know that my standard, okay, your standard cost per pound, this is your standard cost per pound, is going to be 60 cents. For every pound, I am expecting to spend 60 cents in ingredients to be able to manufacture that pound of ketchup. Okay? So that is requirement A. Okay? Very straightforward, just getting your standard quantity times your standard price to get your cost per batch, and then once you get your total cost, you divide by the number of pounds in the batch, which is 7,650 in this particular problem. That can change, of course, in the problems that you have. And then once you divide those numbers, your cost divided by your pounds, you get the standard cost per pound. Okay? Now, the second part, I put it down here because of the column widths. Okay? The part B says, determine the direct materials quantity variance for batch 0899. Okay? Now, for my direct materials quantity variance, we're going to compare the actual quantity minus the standard quantity. And then once we get the difference, we're going to multiply that by our standard price to get our materials quantity variance. Okay? So, the actual quantity spent, I'm going to first enter all of my actual figures, okay? And let me insert another column here. That way, just like I did with the other one, I can go ahead and identify what kind of material it is, okay? So, for my white tomatoes, I've got 4,900 pounds of white tomatoes, okay? This is in pounds. Then I've got 375 gallons of vinegar. I've got 36 gallons of corn syrup, and I've got 140 pounds of salt. Okay, and where am I getting that? I am getting that from right here. Okay, all I did was copy and paste. Okay, these are my actual figures. Okay, now I'm going to subtract. Okay, my standard quantities. Okay, and your standard quantities are up here. Right here are your standard quantities, right there. Okay, so I'm going to subtract by that. So I've got 5,000, 350, 40, and 125. Okay, let me remember that. That's 5,000, 350, 40, and 125. Let me just make sure. 5,000, 350, 40, 125. Yes. Okay. So I copied this information down here. Okay. So now I can get the quantity difference, okay? And your quantity difference will always be your actual minus your standard, okay? So that is what we get, okay? So, what does this mean, this minus sign? Well, it means that you anticipated using 5,000 pounds of tomato. Well, guess what? You actually only used 4,900 pounds of tomato. So you saved 100 pounds of tomato, which is good. Okay? The positive numbers means that you used up more than what you had anticipated, okay? So the minus sign means you used less. The positive sign means you used more. So negative is good, positive is bad, okay, in this particular scenario, okay? Once we get that, we're going to multiply that times our standard price. The standard price is given to you there. Okay, so this is fairly easy. It's just a matter of setting it up, okay? So then you bring in your standard prices down here, okay? Okay. And these are 75, 90, 750, 180. Yep, correct. Okay, just wanted to make sure I ran my numbers correct. Okay, now I can get my materials quantity variance. Your materials quantity variance is going to be your quantity difference times your standard price. Okay, that's what it's going to be. Okay, so now we need to figure out, is this a favorable variance or what type of a variance is it? Okay. The type of variance that we have here. Okay. So, what is happening here? We have a negative number in materials quantity variance. Why do we have a negative number? Well, because we spend less in materials than what we had anticipated. So a negative number means that we saved in materials. We used up less tomato than what we actually had anticipated. So we are saving in materials. We're saving in tomatoes. So because you are saving, you're not using up what you had anticipated. You're producing the same quantity of ketchup with less tomatoes. How are you doing that? By improving your efficiency, by not having as much scrap, by not making any mistakes, by working hard. All of those we take into account, and they result in a positive variance for the company, which results in a negative materials quantity variance because we used up less materials for production, which is good. So because we used up less material, but we still managed to produce the amount of ketchup that we wanted, this is a favorable variance, okay? So a negative amount means you used less than what you had anticipated, so that therefore that is good, okay? For your vinegar, you anticipated using 350, you used 375 gallons. So you use more vinegar than you had anticipated. So that's a positive number. If it's a positive number, that is unfavorable. The corn syrup, you anticipated using 40 gallons of corn syrup, you only used 36. So you used less than what you had anticipated. That results in a negative materials quantity variance. That is a favorable variance. Okay. And then last but not least, we've got salt. We anticipated using 125 pounds of salt. We used 140. That resulted in a materials quantity variance of a positive 27. That is an unfavorable variance because we spend more salt than what we had anticipated. Okay. So now that I've got that, I can figure out my direct materials quantity variance. Okay. I'll put it here. Direct materials quantity variance. Okay. Okay. And your direct materials quantity variance is going to be adding all of these four variances together. Okay. So if you add all of your material quantity variance for each of the ingredients, you still get a negative 5550. Okay. So that means that you are spending less or using up less materials than you had anticipated. Your direct material quantity variance is less than what you had anticipated. So because it is a negative number, that is going to be a favorable variance overall. Okay. Yes, we had some materials that we used up less, others we used up more. But in total, when we're looking at these four ingredients combined, we manufactured the 7,650 pounds of ketchup by using 55.50 less in materials than what we had anticipated, which is awesome. Okay, so that is a favorable variance. Okay, So that is basically the two requirements that they asked us to calculate. The first one, the standard cost per pound. This is how much we anticipate spending in each pound of ketchup. The second requirement was to calculate my direct materials quantity variance, which came out that we are able to manufacture the batch of ketchup for less than what we had anticipated in materials. So that is good for production. Okay, so that is the end of exercise 23-7. Okay, I'll have one more lecture to go dealing with chapter 23. Okay, until next time, guys.